Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we are getting into something that I think so many of us feel, especially people who are, driven, people who really pride themselves on their discipline.
Yeah, it's that incredibly frustrating paradox, isn't it? You
Yeah.
have the ambition, you have the to-do list, you even have the motivation, but the focus just isn't there.
Exactly. You feel scattered, maybe a little burned out, and you keep getting pulled away by things, deep down don't really matter.
And the worst part is we see this happening and we immediately turn it inward. We blame ourselves. We think, I just don't have enough willpower, or maybe I've lost my grit.
And that is the very first thing we have to just take apart. Because for this deep dive, the core idea we're pulling from all this research is that this is not a character flaw. It's not you being lazy.
No. What you're feeling is, at its root, a systems failure.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain's operating system is crashing because of chronic overstimulation. And that crash creates what we're going to call cognitive noise.
A systems failure. I think that's going to be a relief for a lot of people to hear.
It should be. I mean, think about who we're talking to here. You're a high performer. You're someone who is used to setting big goals and, hitting them.
Right. You've got a track record. This feeling of being stuck is new, or at least it's more intense than ever. Deep work, that really complex strategic thinking, it just feels out of reach.
Or it takes every last drop of energy you have, leaving you completely drained. So the question is, if you're so motivated, why does it feel like your own brain is fighting you every step of the way?
And the answer is that the resistance, it's not. It's not a choice. It's an involuntary reaction. It's baked into our wiring. This brings us to a concept called the Zeigarnik effect.
This was discovered way back in the 1920s. It's the psychological tendency to remember unfinished or interrupted tasks far more easily than completed tasks.
In today's terms, we'd call these open loops.
Exactly. Every single unfinished task is an open loop in your brain. And your brain is hardwired to see incompleteness as a threat, or at least as something that needs urgent attention.
Why a threat?
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, an unfinished task could be life or death. A half-built shelter, a predator you lost track of, a food source you didn't fully secure. These things demanded your brain's attention automatically.
Okay, so these open loops are constantly pinging our attention system, whether we want them to or not.
They are. I love the metaphor we found in the notes here. The dog and the squirrel.
Right.
A dog can be perfectly trained, walking right by your side, but the second it sees a squirrel, it's gone.
That instinct just takes over.
It's not being lazy or disobedient. It's responding to a powerful, ancient signal of importance that overrides everything else. The squirrel is a high-priority alert.
And our modern world is just an endless forest of squirrels.
An endless, digitally engineered forest of squirrels. Every notification, every unread email, every half-finished project, every Slack message, they are all cognitive squirrels.
And my brain is just doing what it's designed to do, which is to dart after every single one of them, assuming they're all critical for my survival.
That's the core of the system's failure, an ancient system being ruthlessly exploited by a modern environment.
So that's our mission for this deep dive.
That's it. We're going to unpack the neuroscience here. We'll look at how our attention systems are being hijacked, what's really going on with dopamine when it turns from a useful signal into just noise.
And critically, why just taking a break or resting more so often fails to fix the problem.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's not as simple as just stopping.
Okay, so let's talk about attention. We often treat it like this abstract idea, like a virtue or something.
We do, but the research is crystal clear on this. Attention is a biological process first. It's finite, it's measurable, and it's under constant attack.
You only have so much of it.
You only have so much processing power, and the way your brain allocates that power is, well, it's a battle between two different networks.
Okay, let's break that down. The two networks. First up is the DAN, right? Dorsal Attention Network.
Exactly, the DAN. This is your deep work engine, your CEO mode.
So this is the top-down processing we hear about, the part that lets you, really dig into a complex report or code something difficult.
Right. It's effortful. It takes real, sustained concentration to keep that network engaged. That's the one we think we should be in control of all day.
But it has a competitor.
It has a very powerful competitor, the Ventral Attention Network, or VAN.
A VAN?
Yeah. And this one overlaps a lot with something called the Salience Network. This is your bottom-up processing system. Its job is to constantly scan your environment for anything new, unexpected, or potentially dangerous.
So this is the squirrel detector.
It is the ultimate squirrel detector. And a key part of it, a region called the anterior insula, it lights up like a Christmas tree whenever anything novel pops up.
And right there, That's the conflict.
That's the whole ball game. Our digital world is engineered with billions of dollars of research behind it to do one thing: constantly, aggressively, and relentlessly trigger the van.
Every notification, every infinite scroll, every auto-playing video.
Is a direct missile aimed at your novelty-seeking network. And here's the kicker. These two systems, the DAN and the VAN, they sort of work in opposition.
What do you mean?
When the van is highly active, when your brain's emergency alarm is constantly blaring because of all these digital squirrels, it actively suppresses the function of the DAN.
So you can't be on high alert for novelty and in a state of deep focus at the same time.
It's neurologically very, very difficult. You're trying to write a symphony while a fire alarm is going off in your head. It just doesn't work.
And the data on what this is doing to us is, honestly, it's pretty scary.
It's sobering for sure. There was that UC Irvine study that actually measured this. They didn't just guess.
And what did they find?
They found that the average time any of us spends on a single screen before switching our attention is 47 seconds.
Less than a minute. That's not a character flaw. That's an environmental condition.
It's a condition that has been deliberately created. Think about the design of these platforms. Infinite scroll is a perfect example.
How so?
It intentionally removes the natural stopping cue. There's no end of the page where your brain can go, okay, task complete, I can disengage now. It just goes on forever.
So you're always in a state of what's next.
Yeah.
It taps into that fear of missing out.
Precisely. FOMO, basic curiosity. It keeps that novelty-seeking van engaged 24/7.
Yeah.
There's never a moment of peace.
But the real cost, the thing that just blew my mind, isn't the 47 seconds?
No, that's trivial. The real cost is the time it takes to get back.
Right, the cost of re-engagement. The sources say after any interruption. And this includes when we interrupt ourselves, which is apparently almost half the time.
49%.
It can take up to 25 minutes to get back to that original level of deep focus.
And we have to unpack that number because it sounds like an exaggeration.
It really does. 25 minutes because I glance at a text.
But think about what's happening. If you're working on something complex, say a budget spreadsheet, you're holding maybe 5, 6, 7 different variables in your working memory. You're in a specific mental state. When you switch to check that text, your prefrontal cortex has to dump all of that information to process the new input. It clears the cache.
And the 25 minutes is the time it takes to reload everything.
That's the time it takes to reload all those variables, reestablish the context, and get that specific neural network firing at its peak again.
So even if I spend 5 seconds on the text, I've just slapped a massive cognitive tax on my own brain.
A huge tax. And even if you don't take the full 25 minutes to get back, the sheer effort of forcing that reload over and over and over all day.
That's the exhaustion.
That's the exhaustion, that feeling of being busy all day but getting nothing important done. You weren't working, you were just constantly rebooting your brain.
Which leads us straight into the chemistry of it all.
Yeah.
To dopamine.
Yeah, and we have to fix the popular narrative around dopamine right now. It is so much more than the pleasure chemical.
That's all you ever hear, though.
I know, but it's a huge oversimplification. Dopamine isn't about the feeling of pleasure itself. It's about pursuit. It's about motivation. It's about your brain trying to predict and evaluate what's worth your energy.
Okay, so it's the wanting chemical, not the liking chemical.
That's a great way to put it. It's really tied to this idea of a reward prediction error.
What's that?
It's the gap between the reward you expected to get and the reward you actually got. If you get a bigger reward than you expected, you get a spike of dopamine. That spike tells your brain, hey, pay attention. Whatever you just did, do it again. It drives learning.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to understand the two ways dopamine is released.
Absolutely critical. This is the whole signal versus noise problem. First, you have tonic dopamine.
Tonic.
Think of it like the background hum in a recording studio. It's the steady baseline level of dopamine that's always there. It kind of sets the overall mood and motivation level.
And what does it do?
It influences that big decision we're always making. Do I exploit what I know works, or do I explore something new? It sets the tone for your actions.
Okay, so that's the background hum. What's the other mode?
The other mode is phasic dopamine.
Phasic.
If tonic is the hum, phasic is the alarm bell. It's a big, sudden, brief burst of dopamine in response to something important or unexpected.
Like that reward prediction error you mentioned.
Exactly. The alarm bell goes off to say, this matters. Learn from this.
So in a healthy brain, the hum is low, and the alarm bells are loud and clear.
Perfect. The signal-to-noise ratio is high. You can easily tell what's actually important versus what's just background.
But our modern environment has completely broken this system.
It has turned the volume knob on the background hum up to 11.
How?
All that chronic exposure to high-reward stimuli, the constant pings, the little red dots, the endless scroll of novel content, it doesn't just create those little phasic bursts, it elevates your entire baseline. Your tonic level becomes chronically unnaturally high.
So the background hum is now a deafening roar.
And when the background is that loud, can you still hear the alarm bell?
No. Or at least it doesn't stand out, it just gets lost in the noise.
Your brain becomes less responsive to the signals that should be guiding you toward your actual goals. Everything feels vaguely urgent and important, which means nothing is.
There's some incredible research on this with mice that really illustrates the point.
Yeah, the hyper-dopaminergic mice. It's a mouthful.
What does that mean?
Basically, they were genetically modified so that their brains couldn't clear away dopamine very efficiently. So they lived in a permanent state of high tonic dopamine. They were the overstimulated mice.
And what do the researchers have them do?
They set up a simple choice. The mice had to press one of two levers to get all their food. But the cost, how many presses it took to get a reward, was always changing. One lever would be cheap and the other expensive.
So to be efficient, they had to learn which lever was the better deal at any given time and stick with it.
Right. They had to exploit their knowledge. But what happened with the overstimulated mice?
They didn't.
They showed a hugely diminished ability to exploit what they had learned. They worked harder, pressing the levers more overall, but they spent way more energy on the expensive, inefficient lever.
So they weren't learning less, they just weren't acting on what they learned.
That's the crucial distinction. It wasn't a learning deficit, it was an expression deficit. The high background noise of dopamine shifted their behavior from rational, goal-directed action, exploiting the easy lever to just habitual, mindless, high-effort action.
Mindlessly pressing both levers, that feels uncomfortably familiar.
Doesn't it? It's the perfect picture of modern work life for so many. You're busy, you're putting in the effort, but it's not efficient.
You're checking your email every 3 minutes, pressing the expensive lever, instead of doing the deep work you know is the cheap, high-reward lever.
Because the signal for that deep work, the slow burn reward, it just can't cut through the noise anymore. Your motivation system has been hijacked and pointed at high-effort, low-value habits.
And all of this sets the stage for the other big saboteur of our focus: multitasking.
Or what we call multitasking. We have to start this by just stating the neurological fact. Multitasking is a myth.
The brain can't actually do it.
Not for complex tasks, no. What feels like multitasking is really just your brain switching back and forth between tasks at an incredible speed. Task switching, context switching.
And every single switch comes with a price.
A very heavy price. It's a cognitive tax, and the name for that tax is attention residue.
Okay, what is attention residue?
It's the phenomenon where as you switch from task A to task B, a part of your cognitive bandwidth, a part of your attention, stays stuck on task A. It doesn't fully make the jump.
It's like when you close a program on your computer, but it's still running in the background, eating up RAM.
That's a perfect analogy. And neurologically, what's happening is that your prefrontal cortex, your brain's big control tower, has to physically reconfigure its neural networks for the new task.
So it's like rewiring a switchboard.
Exactly. And while it's doing that rewiring, the activation pattern from the previous task, from task A, it lingers. That's the residue.
And this gets worse when the task is unfinished, right?
Yeah.
Because of those open loops we talk about.
Dramatically worse. If you switch away from an incomplete, complex task, the Zeigarnik effect kicks in and basically screams at your brain to keep that task active. So the residue it leaves behind is thick and sticky.
This is why that quick check of your email is so destructive.
So destructive. Because even if the email is totally unimportant, you forced a context switch. Your PFC had to stop what it was doing, process the email, and then try to switch back. But now you have residue from the deep work leaking into the email and residue from the email leaking back into the deep work.
It slows you down, it increases errors.
And it's exhausting. And what's really insidious is that this cycle trains your brain for distraction.
And does that work?
Every time you feel that little bit of friction on a hard task and you jump to an easy, stimulating distraction, you get a little dopamine hit, a little reward.
So you're reinforcing the distraction pathway.
You are literally strengthening the neural circuits for avoidance, while the circuits for sustained focus and discipline get weaker from disuse. You're practicing being distractible.
We are training ourselves to be bad at the very thing we want to be good at.
And all of this, the noise, the residue, the self-training, it inevitably leads to a cycle of self-blame, which is why we have to talk about these myths that keep people stuck.
Yes, this is so important. These are the stories we tell ourselves that just dig the hole deeper.
And they feel true, but they're based on a misunderstanding of what's happening in your brain and your body.
Okay, let's start with the big one. Myth number 1. Willpower is a fixed personality trait. You either have it or you don't.
Right, and it feels true because you see these super disciplined people, the marathon runners, the early risers, and you think, wow, they were just born with more of it.
Meanwhile, you make it to 4 p.m. on a hard day and you just collapse. You can't resist the urge to scroll or watch TV, and you think, see, I just don't have enough willpower.
But neurologically, that's just not how it works. Willpower isn't a trait, it's a state. It's a very energy-intensive biological process managed by the prefrontal cortex.
The same part of the brain that's already getting hammered by context switching.
The very same. For the PFC to step in and say, hold on, let's pause and make a long-term choice instead of an impulsive one, it needs a lot of resources. It needs energy.
And here's the kicker. The biology of stress and the biology of willpower are fundamentally incompatible.
They are mortal enemies. Your stress response, the fight or flight system, evolved for one purpose: survival. And to survive, it shunts energy and blood flow away from the slow, analytical PFC and towards the primitive, reactive parts of the brain.
You don't need to ponder a spreadsheet when you're running from a tiger.
You absolutely do not. And when you are chronically stressed or sleep deprived or just under constant internal pressure, your body is in a low-grade, perpetual fight-or-flight state.
It's constantly diverting power away from the very brain region you need for impulse control.
So the reframe is this. You don't have bad willpower. Your system is overloaded. The resource you need for self-control has been hijacked by a nervous system that thinks it's in constant low-level danger.
That's a huge shift. Okay, let's do myth number 2. Procrastination is just laziness.
This one feels true because, well, on the surface, it looks like laziness. You are voluntarily choosing to delay something even though you know it's going to cause you pain later.
Right. You choose to watch YouTube instead of starting the scary project. It feels like a lazy choice.
But if you look under the hood, it's not about apathy at all. Procrastination is an emotional regulation problem. It's an avoidance strategy.
So it's not about the task itself, it's about the feeling associated with the task.
Precisely. It's your limbic system, your emotional brain screaming, this feels bad, this causes anxiety or boredom or fear, make it stop now. And it prioritizes that immediate short-term relief over the long-term plan of your rational PFC.
So opening Twitter instead of the report gives me a tiny fleeting break from the anxiety.
It does. And that relief acts as a reward, which reinforces the avoidance pathway. You just taught your brain that the quickest way to feel better is to avoid hard things.
But of course, the anxiety just comes back later, even stronger.
Stronger every time. So the reframe here is, procrastination is not a moral failing. It's your emotional brain seeking a quick fix to survive a perceived discomfort. It's a coping mechanism, not a sign of laziness.
Okay, powerful. And the last one, myth number 3, more effort, more hustle leads to more clarity.
Yeah, the hustle reset. This feels true because our culture glorifies it. We're taught that when you fall behind, the answer is to grind harder, work longer, pull an all-nighter.
You try to fix the problem with a big surge of panicked energy.
But burnout, especially the kind high achievers experience, isn't just about working too much. It's about operating in survival mode for too long.
It's driven by that internal, unprocessed pressure.
Exactly. There's actually an early phase of burnout called the activated drive, where you're flooded with adrenaline and dopamine. You feel incredibly productive, but you're running on fumes. You're redlining the engine.
And you can't stay there forever.
Eventually, the system crashes. That constant state of high urgency leads to real cognitive dysfunction. You can't finish a sentence, you can't remember names, you can't prioritize, you're exhausted.
And clarity, the very thing you're hustling for, is physiologically impossible in a state of panic or shame.
It's suppressed. Your brain cannot do its best strategic thinking when it thinks it's under threat. So the reframe is, clarity is a function of a regulated nervous system. Trying to hustle your way out of burnout is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
So if these myths are wrong, and hustling is the wrong approach, then the obvious answer seems to be rest. We just need to stop.
And that's where we hit the most counterintuitive part of this whole deep dive, the paradox of passive rest.
The idea that just lying on the couch to recharge your brain might not actually work.
It often doesn't, because it's based on a flawed assumption about how the brain uses energy.
The assumption being that thinking hard burns a lot of fuel and not thinking saves it.
Right. But the metabolic data is just stunning. Your brain is unbelievably expensive to run. It's about 2% of your body weight, but uses 20% of your energy.
It's a gas guzzler.
Total gas guzzler. And here's the paradox. The energy consumption barely changes whether you're working hard or resting.
Wait, what?
Studies that measure whole brain energy use found that performing a really difficult cognitive task only increases overall energy expenditure by about 5% compared to just sitting quietly.
Only 5%. That can't be right. It feels like I'm burning 1,000 calories when I'm trying to finish a big project.
I know it feels that way. But while the specific brain regions you're using are firing on all cylinders, other regions often quiet down to compensate. So on a whole brain level, the net change is tiny.
So the brain is expensive to run, period. Whether the lights are on and you're working or the lights are off and you're just idling.
The baseline cost is enormous, which means that simply stopping the work, passively resting, is not an efficient way to save or restore cognitive energy.
This explains why you can take a whole weekend off, do absolutely nothing, and still feel completely drained and unfocused on Monday.
Exactly. You didn't actually refuel in the way you thought you did.
And it gets even worse for high achievers because of what our brain does when we try to rest.
Yes. This is where the default mode network comes in, the DMN.
What is the DMN?
It's a network of brain regions that becomes active when you are not focused on an external task. It's your internal, daydreaming, mind-wandering network.
But for a high performer, it's not really a daydreaming network, is it?
No. For a brain that's been conditioned for constant productivity and pressure, the DMN is a hyperproductive monster.
I know this feeling. I'm trying to relax on a Saturday, and my brain is secretly writing emails, planning next week's meetings, and replaying every mistake I made.
That's your DMN defaulting back to its training. It doesn't know how to be still. It just continues the overfunctioning, the planning, the worrying, even without any external stimulus.
Which brings us to this concept of the burnout bounce.
The burnout bounce. It's why you take a 1-week vacation, feel okay for maybe a day, and then by Tuesday of your first week back, you feel just as burned out as before you left.
Because the break didn't actually change the underlying system. My brain's rest mode is actually just work in a different location mode.
You never actually powered down, you just changed the scenery. The core habits, the internal pressure, the hyperproductive DMN, they were all still running the whole time.
So if passive rest doesn't work, what's the alternative?
The alternative is active restoration.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means we have to do things that actively lower the cognitive load on our system, not just remove the work itself.
And this is where something like attention restoration theory comes in.
Yes. The research here is really consistent. Spending time in natural environments is one of the most powerful ways to restore cognitive function.
But it's not just about nature is pretty. There's a neurological reason for it.
There is. When researchers measure brain activity, they find that processing natural scenery, trees, water, open spaces, requires a significantly lower cognitive and attentional load than processing a complex urban environment.
So a walk through a quiet forest is actively less demanding on my brain than a walk down a busy city street.
Much less demanding. The city is full of complex stimuli, threats, things your van has to track. The forest is, for our ancient brain, a low-stimulus restorative environment.
It allows the system to genuinely power down instead of just idling at 90%.
It's one of the only ways to quiet that hyperproductive DMN and actually get true mental rest.
So let's try to pull all of these threads together. We've gone from the system failure to the dopamine noise to the myths to the failure of rest.
And what emerges is a new picture of burnout and procrastination. It's not a failure of character. It's a misguided attempt by your nervous system at self-protection.
Let's restate that nervous system perspective. Burnout is your body begging you to finally process the chronic stress it has survived.
It's a system that never got the all-clear signal. The emergency's over, but the alarm is still ringing. And that has real physical consequences.
Like with procrastination, the constant cycle of delaying, feeling anxiety, then delaying again, that raises cortisol, the stress hormone.
And high cortisol directly impairs the prefrontal cortex. It literally makes it harder to focus, harder to make good decisions, and harder to access your memory.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle. The stress of not doing the work makes it harder to do the work.
And for high achievers, that stress is mostly internal. It's the pressure, the shame, the feeling of being an imposter. And this is what we call the clarity collapse cycle.
You feel the shame, which kills your clarity, so you try to fix it with a hustle reset.
A plan born from panic. which just floods your system with more stress hormones, reinforcing to your nervous system that you are, in fact, in danger.
You're trying to solve the problem by making the problem worse.
Until you can reframe it, until you see that procrastination is emotional avoidance and burnout is a survival response, then you can stop blaming yourself.
And the goal shifts. It's not about being more disciplined.
It's about becoming more regulated. That's the only way out.
Okay, so let's just put a fine point on the conclusion here. If you are that high performer who feels disciplined but totally unfocused,
It is not your fault. It is a predictable outcome of a system overload.
an overload caused by chronic digital stimulation that hijacks your novelty network,
A high background hum of tonic dopamine that drowns out the important signals.
the crushing cognitive tax of attention residue from constant context switching.
And a nervous system that's stuck in a survival loop, using burnout and procrastination as faulty escape hatches.
We've seen the numbers. Attention shattered into 47-second fragments, a 25-minute penalty for a simple interruption.
And we've seen the paradox that just stopping isn't enough because your brain's metabolism is always high, and your resting state has been trained for productivity, not peace.
I think just knowing all of this it's permission. Permission to stop the self-blame and start looking at this like an engineer.
Yes. We're moving away from this idea of willpower, which we now know is defeated by stress, and towards the idea of regulation. We've mapped the noise. We understand the source of the static.
But that leaves us with a big unanswered question.
The real challenge.
Okay, so if the brain's highest functioning center, the prefrontal cortex, is impaired by noise, stress, and unresolved attention, and passive rest doesn't provide the energy savings we crave, then how do we intentionally clear the neurological noise floor and teach our hyperproductive brain to default back to a regulated